Welcome. You have found Why We Are Christians, a conversational interview show in which I am Katie Philpott, the interviewer, and I am here today with someone who is an actual friend of mine, someone I've known for quite a while, and her name is Karen Hoerdel. Welcome, Karen. This is wonderful to have you with us today.
I am so honored to be here and so glad to have this opportunity to share my testimony.
It is indeed a testimony time, and we're going to find out something about how you came to faith, starting all the way back, what your growing up time was, and then we'll have a second show in which we'll find out a deeper level of what that faith transition has meant for you since. So I'm going to just start asking some questions like, gee, where were you born? And you could even tell us when, if you so wish, and something about your family of origin.
I was born in Dayton, Ohio in 1939. I just turned 79 last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. On the anniversary of Israel's birth, which
Wow.
to me is very exciting. And I was raised conservative Jew, but my family did it for appearances. We were a culture. There was quite a group of Jewish people and Jewish friends, and they wanted us to be separate from Gentiles. We got the very clear message, but I didn't get the message. And when a neighbor moved next door, a little Methodist family, I apparently at age 6 knocked on the door and said, "I want to be your best friend."
And their reaction was?
I guess they accepted me. And they had missionary aunts, but the little girl, Janet, said, "I cannot imagine a life without Jesus."
Oh, how did that affect you, hearing that?
Stayed in my brain until I was 33 years until I met Jesus.
Until you met Jesus personally.
It's
Well, we're going to get there.
It's the power of his name.
The power of his name. Let me just interject a little bit. When I was 4, I was sent to a preschool because my father needed to get his degree, and we were in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they could not find a Jewish preschool. They could only find a Southern Baptist one. And sure enough, one day I came home singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know." And my psychologist father looked at my mother and he said, "Shh. Maybe she'll get over it. Ignore it. It'll go away."
Thank God it
It
didn't.
didn't. No. Back to you.
Yes, so I was in Hebrew school for 5 years, getting ready for bat mitzvah.
A bat mitzvah back then? Tell me
Unheard
about
of.
that.
Unheard of. And in
Because girls, bat mitzvah means girl
girl.
instead of bar mitzvah for boy. And that just wasn't done when you were 13,
No,
I'm sure.
that's right.
That seems like very out there. How did
It
that
was.
happen?
I think it was the cultural pressure that my parents had us in.
Okay.
It didn't mean much to me. As I enjoyed the process. I didn't like Hebrew school, actually.
Okay.
And then I even had, I think, Sunday school confirmation or some other event.
About 16
after-
years old.
And after that, the more education I had, the less I thought about God at all.
I see.
It
That's
was,
not atypical.
no, very typical. And I don't know that I thought much about him before that. Yeah.
So when did you, besides your friend Janet, who said, "I can't imagine a life without Jesus," what was your next introduction or brush with the gospel or Christian thinking even?
My goodness. Well, my father had a lifetime friend of 65 years who was a Catholic believer. They never had an argument, and I went to his Christmas events. I loved it. My mother refused to go. Then I spent 1 semester in a Catholic college to finish my degrees because I just had a baby and I took 3 months out.
College degrees? Now that's also unusual. What college degrees were you going for?
I went for a BA in English and in French, and a BA in, that was major minor, and a BA in education.
My goodness, 2 degrees and children already.
Yes, by the time I was 30, I had those degrees, 3 children, and I taught 3 years. I was a little tired.
I bet. Well, that was quite a lot of accomplishment.
Yes, I
Quite a
look
lot of
back and say
accomplishment.
how, because God's grace was so on me. My children are marvelous people, and I don't think it had much to do with me.
Okay. And just as a little aside, I have met at least one of your children, Laura, and she is lovely.
Yeah.
So now, what happened in that period that you might have started seeing or hearing more about Jesus, if there was such a thing?
There were no such things.
No such things. So
My marriage of 17 years was in trouble, and we were about to depart on a journey with no end, selling the house, taking the children out of school with the possibility, no possibility of the future. And I went out in this vehicle. We were to travel in a red Chevy high cube van. We had a CB handle called Red Wagon. And I got in there, and my heart must have cried for help. I didn't know it. And God audibly called my name.
Karen.
Karen. I knew it was God. I knew He was real. I knew He knew my name, and I knew He was personal, and I knew He had my life in His hands, and I surrendered that part.
Okay. Is this the moment that you consider was your conversion to faith in Jesus?
Absolutely not.
Not. Okay.
Jesus was another 3 years in coming.
Okay. Well, I understand that. Sometimes it isn't all at once. Certainly, if you hadn't heard the full gospel message, it would be a little unusual for you to come into full faith. But step by step.
Even if I'd heard it, you know, there's a blindness that takes time, because I believe I heard it several more times before I heard it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I respect that and try to remember that when dealing with other people.
It's pretty hard to communicate to someone their need, because the word sin often has to come in, and nobody likes the word sin, or that we have to consider that we are sinners. I mean, it's like completely verboten in our culture.
Absolutely.
And it's really off-putting.
We're good.
We're good. We're evolving even.
Well,
into
the
being
Jewish
better.
people have this basic we're good thing.
Yes.
And it took me, even when I came to Jesus, I still thought I was a pretty good girl. But it took a while till I understood how rotten I am and how much I need Him. Yes.
Okay. So there was this moment in the van when you heard God calling you. What else did you sense that He was telling you?
Hours I spent with Him. Perhaps one of the most significant things was that He gave me a vision of the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
And He told me what it was.
So,
but I didn't understand.
Okay. So now you're on this trip finally, and you're going for a long time across country with how many children?
3 children.
3 children.
They were 15, 10, and 11, or 9 and 10, right in there. I'd have to. And my husband's 6'4", and David's 6 foot, and so it was an adventure, all right. And we arrived in Sonoma, but God had said California was going to be my end point.
And so this was also part of the message in the van,
Yes.
or that kind of grokking understanding of, okay, so you're going to end up in California, and so there you are.
Sonoma, of all places, never heard of it.
Never heard of it, no.
Thought California was a desert, and this was a gorgeous, green, flowering place the first week of December. What?
What? Yeah, not in Ohio like that.
It must be Eden.
Right.
I must be Eve. I was confused.
Yeah.
But God audibly called me again,
Mhm. Again, when you got to Sonoma.
crossing into Sonoma around the raceway, into
Okay.
that gorgeous view. This is where you stop.
So this is where you stop. And so how did you communicate that to your husband and your family?
I said it. I said, this is where the children and I would like to stop. We need to stop here. And we hunted for a house together. So it was received.
Okay. So smooth sailing so far.
Sort of.
Sort of.
So we put a bid on the lowest priced, I don't say cheap,
Yeah.
house in Sonoma, even at that time, and it was a funky farmhouse on an acre. It was in escrow.
Mhm.
Well, nothing happened after that. So he put us in a tract home. We only had what we carried cross country, a duffel bag each and a 5-inch foam to sleep on.
Okay.
And with that, we were deposited, and he left.
He just abandoned, huh?
He made up for it in his life.
Okay.
And so there we were, and we had been immunized against everything, being doctors' kids,
Yes.
except chickenpox.
Oh, really?
3 of them got it. 1, 2, for 3 months. I
Oh,
had
boy.
chickenpox kids on the foam with the duffel bag. Someone gave us a TV. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a call that the house was mine.
The one that had been in escrow?
Mhm.
Now, the escrow was somebody else's escrow, or you were at?
Somebody else's.
So it fell out of escrow.
Yes.
So you were next on the list. House is yours. Come and get it.
So I did tell my parents.
And
they
now
were,
you're going to be a single parent? Yeah.
Mhm. They were gracious.
Mhm.
They helped me.
Okay.
And I'm deciding, since I had been a teacher, but I'd stopped my education after the master's because it was becoming not a pleasure.
Mm.
My field of interest, my books, my reading were
Mhm.
getting dry.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I go further, it's going to spoil what I love.
Mm-hmm.
But I need a break anyway, after all of this that I
Yes.
told you.
Trauma.
I'm going to take pottery for fun, and I don't know what else I was going to do. And I got hooked on that. And I did it for 8 years to the point before we arrived in Sonoma.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, I better teach. I got 3 children here.
Mm-hmm.
Pottery is not very lucrative.
Right.
But I went over to the house to check it out, and there was a man there all covered in clay. You're a potter.
You're a potter.
Yes, I am, but I have to sell my pottery.
And his equipment, you mean?
Everything, kiln.
Everything, kiln?
Well, not the wheels, but the kiln and the building.
Yeah.
It was a big red barn on a raw milk dairy farm,
Oh.
and a huge building. So the back was the kiln, the middle was the work area, the
Mhm.
front was a shop that I made into a shop for
Wonderful.
selling the goods. And I said, I guess I'll be a potter. I just trusted God with my life.
Okay. And that worked out?
I was tootling along for 3 years, not spiritually moving anywhere. So I do recall having a apprentice who was an apostolic. I had several apprentices.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke to me. He must have spoken to me about the gospel a bit. I barely remembered. It was years after I met Jesus that I even recalled it.
Mm-hmm.
Going to church with him and kneeling for the prayer.
Okay.
But it obviously wasn't the time.
Yeah, it wasn't quite.
It.
You were just getting
Warmed
prepared.
up.
The bed was the seed bed was getting prepared. It was starting to get water.
Rough
Hasn't
territory.
quite sprouted yet.
And I have found in my experience that most Jewish people have had a sign or wonder before their salvation, as if I had 3 audible voices. You've only
Yes.
heard 2 so far.
2 so far.
And
okay.
they will have a vision, or it's quite common. Jews require a sign, it says in the Bible.
Yes, yes. So there you are. You instead of being a teacher, you're being a potter, and I'm assuming that was enough to get by on.
I don't know how.
Amazing, huh?
In the meantime, Laura, my middle child, David was off to college. No, not yet. Laura and Susan, she's 18 months younger. Laura first went to a Baptist church in town, a little tiny church, because she went with her friend, and she got saved.
Wow.
And
And
then,
what year was that? Was that during maybe the Jesus People movement?
well, we were at the end of the movement because we got to Sonoma in 75.
Oh, yeah.
And that would have been 76 or 7.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Right?
it's
Our
over.
first year when we were there. Poor kids went through a lot. Not that that's what caused them to find Jesus, but it does often take us an upset.
Yes, it often does.
And then Sue, shortly afterwards, met Jesus, and they asked me if they could be baptized. And I said, no way! Didn't know what
Even though God was your best friend, no way, okay.
I didn't understand. And I know that those little ladies prayed for me.
Yes.
I did not come in the church.
Yes.
And he humbled me that when I did start teaching, they came to my studies.
Oh,
I
that's
was
sweet.
so broken by that.
That was very sweet.
Yeah.
And we're going to get, in our second show with you, we'll get into what it is that you were teaching. So we'll put that aside for the moment. So you said you had heard God's voice 3 times, and we've only heard about 2 times. So move us in
A little bit.
little bits towards the third time. What was that about? And then back us up and tell us how you got there.
Right. It's quite a story. Kurt always, my husband, said we should write a book or make a film. But I'm at the Pottery, my children in school, and I was compelled, I use that word, to go to breakfast at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'd had breakfast, I got there early, and I closed the shop. If you close down, it's closed down.
Yeah.
I couldn't just go, so I had material about going to Lima, Peru, where my friend that had told me about Jesus was living. And so I took brochures, and I go to this little health food restaurant that is just a hole in the wall, and I laugh because we met there. Who would meet there? I come in and I see Kurt, the back of him. I did not see him physically for weeks and weeks. Sat at my table, busy with my stuff. He's getting up to go, and I felt like my world would crash between my feet and I would fall through. And I went up. Maybe that's what people, when they want to have to go accept Jesus in church, feel. I went up and said, my name is Karen. What's yours? That is not my style, before, since, or after. Anyway, with Kurt, that was his style. So he's thinking, he tells me later, that's my style. But anyway, I said, do you want to sit with me at the table? And he says, he'd been dating. He was a Christian of maybe 8-10 months.
Oh.
And he'd been dating, and they weren't Christians. But he was not he prayed to God to bring him a wife, because he was not doing well, but that wife had to come to him, which is why I had to go. First thing he said.
Of course, it happened that way for everyone.
First question, are you a Christian? What do you mean? I'm Jewish. I didn't say that, I'm thinking that, because everyone else is a Christian, aren't they?
Right, that's right. We have the world divided into us and them. Us are the Jews, and them are everyone else, and everyone else has to be a Christian, because isn't that what everyone else is?
Yes.
We weren't even thinking Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, or just us and them, Jews and Christians. Okay.
And the whole thing was God. He said, do you believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ?
Well, yes, you had been shown that, so
I
you
said, yes.
Yes.
So when we go out, we made a dinner date for the next night. I get in the car, and that's the third audible voice of God that says, "That's the man you're going to marry."
Boom.
I thought, great, but I didn't, when God talks, okay.
Okay. And so, next night.
We have dinner he cooked. Funny, barbecued shark.
Excuse me.
Okay. He was supposed to call Sunday, did not call. Monday at the pottery, he calls. I say, don't bother to even start this relationship because you can't keep your word. He immediately.
That was a little harsh, but go ahead.
Came out of me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm strong. He got on his knees apparently and said, God, give me a second chance. Drove fast. He drove fast in those days before God harnessed him. Down the hill, Mount Veeder, to a jewelry store in Sonoma and bought a ring. Brought it to me.
Wow.
Sweating.
Yeah.
I said yes. Because God said,
this is the man you're going to marry. Okay, so then you get married?
We made a 6-month ahead commitment. We were in marriage counseling with the pastor. We start going to church right away because he's a very serious Christian.
Okay.
He's got
fairly new, which means on fire, almost automatically.
I guess, but I sort of resent that because his fire only got brighter. And I think that mine stayed just from commitment from the beginning to the end steady.
Yeah.
We would do the best, the most we can. We follow the Lord, do what he says. But his fire was obvious.
Yes.
So he was very strongly, when he prayed, he got downloaded. He was an evangelist, and he was an end times prophet, and he started preaching before he even knew what the gospel was.
Oh, boy.
But somehow God blessed it.
Sure. Kent tells stories of people who, during the Jesus People movement, they barely knew what the gospel was, but they could preach to where people were just automatically converted.
He did think that it meant that we had to wait until they said the prayer.
Well, that's okay.
So many nights, excuse me, we were there till midnight.
So he could wait till they're
They
completed.
just wanted to get rid of us. Excuse me.
Oh, we'll cut this little piece out where we're coughing and whatnot. So
we're
cut this out.
We're in church 4 times a week. I loved it.
You loved going to church.
I loved what was happening there.
Yes. And which one was this?
This was Calvary Chapel.
Calvary Chapel. Okay, very good.
They taught the Old Testament. I forget what book they were in. They sang songs that had even Israeli sounds to them.
A Jewish flavor.
Jewish flavor. And they had, excuse me, need a tissue.
All right.
And they taught about Israel.
Okay, hold on. We'll cut this part out.
Okay.
So just.
They taught about Israel, and I learned most of my Jewishness of the faith of Christianity in church.
You're right. Isn't that interesting?
I wish it were so.
It happens a lot to a lot of us Jews who come to faith in Jesus and therefore become Christians, that we then become more acquainted with our Jewishness and learn more about the Jewish roots of Christianity.
Absolutely. It just was light bulbs.
Well, I remember many times that I've been with a Gentile, not necessarily a believer, but a Gentile person, and it finally comes around to where I realize I have to say, well, Jesus was Jewish.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And all of his disciples were Jewish. Oh, yeah. And the whole early church was Jewish. Oh, yeah. And the first problem they had is, what do we do with all the Gentiles who are believing in our Messiah?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I always say, and the Bible was written by Jews except Luke. And that one Gentile said to me, but he was a doctor.
Yeah, but
Like,
he was a doctor.
give him back, you know.
Give him- So here you are, and you are engaged, and you're going to church with this new man, Kurt, and I guess there's a point at which you do get married. I know you were married to him.
Yes. I'm reading, gobbling tapes at that time, cassettes, checking them out of the libraries.
Yeah.
And I'm still not saved. I'm
Still
hearing
not
it
saved.
because I know that in church they were pushing it every service, I'm sure. But again, what it takes till you hear.
Yes.
So I didn't have Jesus yet. But I think also if a Jewish person goes to church and they are comfortable,
Yes.
they're on the hook.
They're on the hook. So in about a minute and a half, is there? Can we get in a minute and a half to your conversion?
Yes. So on Christmas, Kurt said, "You're not a Christian, I'm leaving." That was 3 months into the engagement.
Okay.
I'm reading, I'm listening to tapes. It says, one tape says, "No relationship will work without Jesus." In the middle, it was the click, because that's why my first marriage, which should have been perfect, was not. And I said, "God, if I know you're real, but you're telling me the only way to you is Jesus. I can't even say his name, but if it's true, I want it." And I looked down, and one of the books had a prayer. And I said, "If this is true, God, come in my heart. If you are God, come and live in me, take over my life and forgive my sins." So you can ask as an honest question,
Yes.
the way the mother of Jesus
Yes.
asked God, "How can this so be?"
Yes. Right.
And so I think that's a good way to tell Jewish people that they can ask as a question, a meaningful question.
Yes.
And then Kurt called the next day because God, no, and he did not believe me until I walked down the aisle 3 months later.
That's a wonderful story, and I do agree that it often takes such a prompting where we have to ask God, if you are real, please show it to me. So we're pretty much coming towards the end of this segment of talking together, and it's been lovely.
Very.
And I can't wait to get to the next part in which we find out what your life with Kurt was like and what kind of ministry you were involved in. You have now reached the end of the first segment that we have with Karen Hoerdel, and Why We Are Christians will be back again next week. Please tune in again. So long.